Check 1, 2. Check. It is officially rivalry week. It's officially rivalry week. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like this is actually the point into the season that we are in, but we have Ohio State, Michigan, Texas A&M, Texas, to which I will be at that game. Very excited about that. We also have Virginia Tech, which has ACC title implications for Virginia. There is rivalries across the country. The Egg Bowl will also be on Friday. We will talk about everything reaction-wise today. We're not going to be doing our deep dive into rivalry week. That will be on Tuesday. Probably expect like a 45 to an hour-long show there. And then for Thanksgiving, may do a double dip on Wednesday. You may also see me on the CEO Sports Show on Monday, which if this is your first time, let me give you an introduction before I just start blabbering off as if you've been here every single day. This is the Stadium Pulse College Football Show. My name is Tegan Randolph, your host for all things college football. This is powered by Kretschmann Media. The reason why I mentioned the CEO Sports Show is if you click on the channels tab on this page, you'll find everything that you're looking for in terms of sports media. If you're not a huge college football fanatic, but you love the NFL, you love the NBA, I promise you there's channels on this page that you will love. But you clearly like college football enough to click on this page. You clearly are interested enough. I'm still dealing with a little bit of a cough, so bear with me. We have a jam-packed show for you. We have Oregon USC reaction. We'll talk about that in deep detail. We'll talk about Oklahoma and Missouri. We'll talk a little bit about the ACC title race. And then, of course, the title of today's show, we'll talk about the number one overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft, because we haven't really dove a little bit into or done a deep dive into the NFL draft, but I think no better time than now to talk about it as we are starting to turn the corner, close the book on 2025, and open the book to 2026. Let's get some water. I'll also say the reason why we're doing the show early, traditionally, we do it at 2:30 at the turn of the noon slate for the NFL to the midday slate. I'll actually be at the Cowboys-Eagles game. That is the reason why we're doing this early. So hopefully people, as they're getting ready to watch the Red Zone and some more football this weekend on a beautiful November 23rd, 2023, if I could speak today, that'd be lovely. USC is eliminated from the college football playoff. The big game of this weekend was USC traveling to Eugene, Oregon to go to Autzen. Pardon me. Let's restart that for the folks. Oregon's officially going to be in the college football playoff. They get their signature win. USC travels to Eugene, to Autzen Stadium, one of the most underrated environments in all of college football, a bucket list spot for me, and they have eliminated the USC Trojans. Now, let's take a moment. Let's take a beat. A lot of people want to start off with the winners when doing reaction shows, but I think as we get to the tail end of the college football season and these teams that many people, because of how the college football playoff is and how it takes over the entire narrative of the sport, understandably so, it is the big thing that is going on right now. USC is not going to be talked about for the rest of the year, unless talking about a resume builder for maybe, say, I don't know, who beat USC? That was a big resume builder. Oh, Oregon. Yeah. The 7th team in the country beats the 15th team in the country 42-27. And USC, if I'm a fan of the Trojans, if I'm the fan of USC overall, do I look at the 2025 season as a success? Do I feel good about where I am as a program, as a football team, especially knowing the trajectory that USC has been on since Caleb Williams left the program and that massive move from Oklahoma to USC, Lincoln Riley, of course, being the catalyst that drove that. How do I feel? As much as you could probably look at the 2025 season as a missed opportunity, this was the Super Bowl spot, as many people will talk about, where you win, you're going to be in the playoff, you've exceeded expectations. Obviously, last year was disastrous in terms of the one-score games always going against USC and not in their favor. I have to feel pretty good if I'm a USC fan, and that's for a couple of different reasons. You saw progression, you saw maturity. At the end of the day, Lincoln Riley's a very young coach. Contrary to maybe some of the rumors that have been drummed up by like the Josh Pates of the world, to which we haven't really seen any of those come to fruition around Lincoln Riley, just kind of keeping an eye on him, putting a pin in that. I have to feel pretty good because you see the maturity of a young coach that potentially could be your long-term solution. I think we look at 2026 as a key year for them, potentially even 2027 as like the last-ditch effort year if we don't see the progression to a college football playoff run, because you have to also understand, what is the expectation? We talked about this when we were talking about Penn State and Virginia Tech when talking about James Franklin and that move, to which I got some pushback around like, well, the media was bashing on James Franklin for years, and now all of a sudden it's a home run hire. Well, first of all, I didn't say that they should fire James Franklin immediately. I thought firing him was a short-sighted move if you didn't have a solution fully ready to go that was going to project to be better than James Franklin. Now they're looking to their left and right and scrambling. James Franklin's a damn good coach. Is he a national championship level coach? That's to be seen. But bringing it back to USC, with Lincoln Riley and his progression at USC, a guy that was making college football playoffs with Oklahoma, was potentially like the next Lane Kiffin type that we're seeing, at least right now, where a young offensive-minded head coach that is going to take this USC program, pump some life into it, and then we're going to see a powerhouse on the West Coast, and that powerhouse turned out to be actually the team that they faced in the Oregon Ducks. I would also say it's important to note that you guys have the #1 class in high school recruiting for the class of 2026. If you look at this USC team, I think talent-wise, there's still a lot to be desired knowing what the standard is for USC. And to the original point, USC's standard is national championships, to close the book on what I was talking about before. And I'm hoping with the momentum that we're seeing in high school recruiting, which I always use the analogy, contrary to like Clemson and Colorado, right? The two polar opposite sides when we're talking about the extremes of not using the transfer portal and using it. A well-oiled machine in the college football atmosphere of 2025 is like building a cake. You need to have the basic vanilla cake that's high school recruiting. But if you just have that, it's good. It's not going to be good enough to win national championships, i.e., when you look at Clemson. They're great at traditional recruiting and development, but because they don't use the transfer portal, they don't bring in the higher end talent to supplement for some of the gaps that they may not anticipate with the traditional recruiting. Then we go to Colorado and you get the frosting. That's all you get is frosting. You're going to get a sugar high from it. You're going to get the Travis Hunters of the world, the Shador Sanders, the noise, the hype. But is it anything sustainable? Is it anything real? That's to be seen. So USC getting the #1 overall high school recruiting class as of right now, November 23rd, 2025. Obviously, we still have early National Signing Day and all these different things. Regardless, I expect them to finish quite well, even if it's not #1. That is a great sign for the development of USC. And as well as we've seen what I think is some of the most impressive wins of the Lincoln Riley era, the win against Nebraska, even with Dylan Raiola being hurt, and you can make the fair argument that they probably lose that game if Raiola is playing. At the end of the day, it is a win, and that is not a loss. You throw in the fact that you had Michigan coming into town, a juiced-up version of Iowa, another team that you beat at home that are very centric on the rushing attacks that have exploited USC or Lincoln Riley teams time and time again. You found ways to win. And so when we look at USC, before we dive into the Oregon side of things in this game, I think it's very much fair to say that you can look back at this season a little bit proud. I wouldn't look at this season just because it's a missed opportunity like it's a bad one. Very similar to Tennessee. Tennessee's not making the college football playoff. I would be proud if I'm a Volunteers fan of what Josh Heupel and this program was able to accomplish, knowing some of the circumstances and where they needed to go. Sure, you could talk about how Tennessee missed their opportunity against Georgia and how USC missed their opportunity against Oregon. But even then, being in the atmosphere of potentially making a college football playoff late into the season, there's got to be a supplemental prize. There's got to be a secondary prize. It doesn't have to be college football playoff or bust. Now, I sound like Eli Drinkowitz. Oregon got their signature win. To talk about the matchup a little bit more, Oregon got their signature win that they desperately needed. Am I one to believe that you can crystallize the moment and really put yourself in the shoes of what happened with Penn State and Oregon? Of course. At the end of the day, even though Penn State's talent roster is still at a high level, even without Drew Aller, we see it that they've been able to match up with an Indiana on any given weekend, especially at home, night whiteout game. You could crystallize that, but it's diluted every single week, especially when James Franklin got fired. That win did not hold the weight that we thought it would. Call a spade a spade. They needed a signature win because if they were to lose this, sure, it would be their second loss of the season, Indiana being the first one, but they would have no signature wins. And with the logjam of 10-2 programs that we are anticipating to have for the college football playoff, you would be looking at Oregon as a potential team that would be on the outside looking in, one of those first teams out. Because we can't just base it on the talent rosters like many people did with like Alabama last year versus SMU. You have to win the games on the field. What makes this win so impressive for Oregon isn't for the fact that it was a top 15 win against a USC program that was firing on all cylinders. Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane, one of the best wide receiver duos in the entire country, not named Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. They're freaking ridiculous. I mean, Makai Lemon sure didn't light up for 147 yards, but you have Jacoby Lane that looks like the second coming of Drake London. Makai Lemon is lightning in a bottle as a wide receiver. I don't care about the size. He's going to be a superstar at the NFL level. Jaden Mayava is one of my favorite quarterbacks in the entire country because he's not the most talented guy that USC and Lincoln Riley has ever had, but he runs the offense at a very high level and arguably better than Caleb Williams. I'm not saying that he's a better player than Caleb Williams, but running the Lincoln Riley offense, you can make a fair argument that Jaden Mayava runs the system better. But Dante Moore, we will have a conversation about Dante Moore later in the show. And if you're watching this on the short or medium form content, go check out the full show. But I want to talk about him in the NFL draft perspective. But in this game specifically, going 22 for 30, 237, 2 touchdowns and an interception won't light up the world in terms of the stat sheet. You have to understand how impressive that game was. There was a seam shot to Kenyon Sadiq, another player that is just, listen, this is a kid-friendly show. I'm trying not to cuss, but my gracious, there is a lot of inappropriate words I could use to describe how freakish Kenyon Sadiq is as a player. He's freaking ridiculous. 6 catches, 72 yards, 2 touchdowns. And you throw in the context that Oregon was missing so many talented players on the outside. Their weapons, outside the running backs and obviously Kenyon Sadiq, Dante Moore was not working with what he was used to. And we could talk about how Oregon has all the talent in the world, understandably so. Next man up mentality. They have the next 5-star ready to go. With wide receivers and quarterbacks, especially a quarterback like Dante Moore that works with timing and touch and accuracy, you're working with guys that you don't work with a ton. That can cause a lot of problems. There was moments where we saw that, but it didn't derail Oregon. And when we talk about Oregon in this game, even though they had like 11 penalties, over 100 penalty yards, and USC needed them to shoot themselves in the foot in terms of turnovers and leave the game up in the air for USC to take because USC can score the ball on anybody. When Oregon needed to drive the ball downfield, they were able to do so because Dante Moore was on time. It was freaking ridiculous. I saw NFL ball after NFL ball. I'm all in with Dante Moore. I get it. There is some cases that I was a little worried. I even heard a commentator say that he doesn't like getting hit. Red flag, in my opinion. Not to say I want a quarterback like Cam Scatterbill running into players and wanting to get hit, but I get a little worried about the mentality. But then I'm watching the game and the dude is just dealing. I bring it up again. A seam shot over the middle, the one area a football player or a quarterback does not want to throw over or can't throw over at a high level. We're talking about the things that make you a one percenter when talking about the NFL draft. Throwing over the middle and seam shots at a high level is something that we saw Fernando Mendoza do against Penn State. We saw it with Dante Moore. I think this Oregon team could potentially win the national championship for two main reasons. Because before you bring up a flaw with them, which there is plenty, you look at every other contender and you can point out another flaw with them. Everyone is flawed. And I think this Oregon team was so damn impressive in the way that they find ways to win. They could run the ball. They could beat you doing that. They could throw the ball. They could beat you doing that. Their defense in this pass rush can beat you doing that. Very similar with Texas A&M, where we're talking about a team that can beat you in a multitude of different ways. They just needed to do it against high-level competition. I was very impressed with Oregon and USC. As unfortunate as this loss is, I would still feel good about their future moving forward. Oh, let's get some water first, folks. Like I said, even in the preview and predictions shows over the past couple weeks, this was a light week. But expect a very long show for rivalry week and this beautiful Thanksgiving. We'll have a whole Thanksgiving show and everything. Number 8, Oklahoma beats number 22, Missouri, 17-6. Oklahoma is a flawed team. Let's start this off right now. Oklahoma is a flawed program right now, and I would not want to face them in the playoff. Very similar, and I think this is a great analogy. If you follow NFL, this team reminds me of the Houston Texans. Oklahoma and the Houston Texans both have incredible defenses. Mind you, Oklahoma had this performance defensively without R. Mason Thomas, a future NFL player. They don't even have their top end pass rusher. It doesn't matter. This defense flies to the football. This defense makes a quarterback's life so difficult. And knowing what the quarterback play and that standard is within the 12-team playoff, obviously you have like Julian Sayin, Fernando Mendoza, Marcel Reed, and even then Marcel Reed isn't this hyper-accurate quarterback, Dante Moore. If you're able to get those guys to have an off day, you could easily see Oklahoma making a deep playoff run. Now, your counter to that, more than likely, would be around the Oklahoma offense. And that's why I say they're a flawed team. The Houston Texans offense, as of right now, is quite flawed. They have to find a way to create an explosive with maybe a Nico Collins, maybe one of their rookies, or maybe hope that their rookie running back makes a big-time play. Very similar to the young running back room that is in the Oklahoma offense. And John Mateer is a playmaker, but he's kind of hindered due to this injury. Now, I think Sooners fans are growing impatient with using the excuse of the injury. I do worry with a guy like John Mateer, even going into the season, one of my favorite players in the entire country, the exit or the angle that he is throwing the football has been talked about time and time again. But rarely do people talk about what is the impact of having such a low launch angle. Very similar to if you were shooting a basketball and the ball was coming out very flat. The problem with that, when throwing a football, and we saw it a little bit in this game, is when you need John Mateer to kind of have an arch to it to drop it in a bucket. It allows for a lot of cornerbacks, if they're able to get their head turned and they're in good position against like Satania or Deion Burks, they are much more easily likely or capable to be able to swat a ball down. A lot of times if Mateer needs to get a moon ball, very similar to what we saw with like Quinn Ewers, I think of the one against Alabama that many Texas fans will think about, of getting it right over the shoulder, the ball dropping into a bucket. Mateer in the launch angle where he throws a football causes a lot of challenges and his inaccuracies as well. But even then, a defense like this in a college football playoff setting, that even with a Bill Prabula who returned with a dislocated ankle, went 20 for 36, 231, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The overall team went for 35 carries and 70 total yards, 2 turnovers, 3 of 15 on third down, and 0 for 1 on fourth down. There was a moment in this game where Oklahoma got a blocked kick that absolutely changed the momentum, because early into this game, it had Missouri written all over it. It looked like the game that many people were expecting, where Missouri and Oklahoma were going to trade off punts. Their defenses were going to show up, and Missouri's front seven is legit. But once this blocked kick happened, I believe 87 yards, Isaiah Satania, this offense just needs 1 or 2 plays to just get enough on the board, and this defense will continue to sink their teeth in. And I think of the college football playoff setting where you have an Oklahoma team with Brent Venables, and when we get to this stage, I think something that not a lot of people talk about is if you get these defensive-minded head coaches or even offensive-minded guys more time to prepare and know what's ahead of them, that is invaluable. And I think a guy like Venables, if he's going into a playoff setting and he maybe, for whatever reason, because they're not going to the SEC championship, they know exactly who they're more than likely going to face in the first round, it's just more time. As they get deeper and further into the playoffs, they're going to make a quarterback's life a living hell. Missouri this season, I mean, very similar to what we did with USC, where we have to kind of close the book. They've been out of the college football playoff race after they got boat raced by Texas A&M. This team needs to find a way to get over the hump, very similar to Penn State, in a sense that you beat who you're supposed to beat, but you can't elevate and get to that next level. You can't scratch and claw, almost worse than what we saw with James Franklin and Penn State. They at least had something in the first column when we're talking about like top 25, top 15 wins. Missouri doesn't have that. Missouri doesn't have that signature win. And I fear with all the Eli Drinkowitz noise, they may not get it in the Eli era. Maybe a better departure than or breakup than people realize. But I still think that this team is very good. Like, the defense is very good. Is it good enough to make college football playoff run? Is this era going to be good enough? That's where I begin to question it for Missouri. But Oklahoma, man, would not want to face them in the college football playoff setting whatsoever. The ACC title race is a mess. This won't be like a full segment by any means, but I thought I'd give y'all an update. The ACC is an outright mess. We've talked about this before for weeks at this point. The ACC is a goddamn mess. Miami's more than likely going to be set up to make a college football playoff run. If they're able to win out their last game of the season, I forget. Oh, it's against Pitt, which will be another quality win. We'll have the conversations about Notre Dame and Miami when we get to that point. If it has to become a resume versus resume battle, it's going to get disgusting. It's going to get nasty. And I frankly don't know if it's going to be fixed by the time that we get to Selection Sunday. We have a very clear picture on who's going to be in the ACC title, and it more than likely will not be Miami. Right now, we'll have Virginia Tech face off against Virginia. Rivalry week, that makes sense. Virginia, if they win, they're in the ACC title. Pardon me, I dropped my pen. Virginia looks like they're well on the way to an ACC title shot because Virginia Tech's not that good. Miami versus Pitt. If Virginia Tech beats Virginia, if I'm remembering this correct, the winner of Pitt and Miami would make it. And the team that's best suited to go to the ACC title is SMU. SMU just has to win and they're in, and they go and face off against Cal. And if that happens, as someone that is a big fan of SMU, I've made videos about SMU. I have so much respect for SMU, a team that has been banished from making a Power 4 program for years and finally makes it, and then they go back-to-back, at least making the ACC title game, back-to-back playoff runs. I only put this in my notes right here just to give warning. But let's talk about the NFL draft. Who should be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft? Now, you may ask, well, we don't know what the draft order is, and that's completely fair. We know what teams are going to be in contention for it. We know what teams potentially would be interested in a quarterback or an edge player. It's really if the Tennessee Titans end up getting the number 1 overall pick. If it's the Jets, if it's the Browns, especially with the Browns. Like, I understand we're about to probably watch Shador Sanders beat the Raiders, and it's going to be a bunch of media noise. We're not going to talk about that today, but I think the Browns more than likely will go quarterback because most of the quarterbacks on that roster are either not going to be on there or are late round picks. And if you have a guy like Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, or Ty Simpson available, go get those guys. We also have to talk about Dante Moore. He at least has like rumors surrounding him of returning to school. I'm going to work off the idea that if and when he speaks to an agent and that agent ends up telling him, hey, listen, you're going to look at the 2027 draft. And even without the quarterback position of the Arch Mannings of the world and many others that project to be a better class, you're also going to be fighting against edge players and tackles and really talented players in 2027 that are going to either drop you down the board. Now, if you want to stay and develop, that's completely understandable if you're Dante Moore because he went to Oregon, benched himself for an entire year following UCLA to develop himself. So I wouldn't blame him if he was to stay at Oregon. I think part of that is also contingent on if Will Stein, the offensive coordinator at Oregon, stays within the university because I'm sure they have a great relationship. But I'm going to be working off of Dante Moore enters this NFL draft because I think once he realizes that he could be in that top 3 contention, and I don't know if he would make that in 2027, not to say he can't play at that level, it just would be a much more difficult competition to get there. We're going to talk about Ty Simpson and Fernando Mendoza. I would also want to shout out a couple of the other non-quarterback positions. Ruben Bain is freaking ridiculous. Ruben Bain is incredibly talented. He is hitting every part of what we think his ceiling could be at the collegiate level. God knows what it could be at the NFL level. Very early into the season, he was putting teach tape after teach tape. He is a freak of nature when he puts all of the pieces together. There's not a tackle that I think would be worthy of going number 1. I mean, we've seen some incredibly gifted tackles. Joe Alt comes to mind and many others in previous seasons that didn't reach number 1. I don't think like a Spencer Fanu or definitely not a Caden Proctor, Francis Mauigoa. Like, I think there's a lot of tackles that could be guards. Like, there's that dynamic, and guards just don't go number 1. I think it'll be quarterback. And I think if Tennessee, I keep saying Nashville because it is in Nashville. If the Titans get number 1, I think that they could trade back and get more assets. So I think that for the point of what we want to talk about is the quarterbacks at the top 3, what's the differences and which one would I prefer? We'll rank them 1 through 3. Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana is a quarterback that I like as a draft prospect. He's got an arm. He's able to dissect the middle of the field, which I've talked about before is a rarity for a lot of young quarterbacks. A lot of them feel comfortable going to the sidelines, and Fernando Mendoza is great at doing that as well. If you put on his tape, especially even from Cal, we're talking about a quarterback that throws the best back shoulder fade in the entire country. I still think that's the case. I do think Mendoza doesn't have the upper echelon that you're looking for in a number 1 overall pick. I would give him the comparison to like a Matt Ryan, a great deep ball, highly accurate, not this plus athlete, but great size. I mean, a lot of people are going to make the comparison to Jared Goff, and I can see that with Fernando. We're talking about a former Cal quarterback. He's got the size, the frame. If you wanted to make a prototypical quarterback that the NFL draft would love, it's probably going to be a Fernando Mendoza, very similar to a Jared Goff. But I think Mendoza handles pressure a little bit better, but the decision-making reminds me a lot of an early Matt Ryan. And both of those guys went very high in the NFL draft. So it wouldn't shock me if Mendoza is the number 1 guy. You could kind of see the PR campaign starting to build from him. He's starting to get in front of the camera more, speak to the media. People think of him as a very intelligent player. Kirk Cignetti has put him into a great system, and I'm sure if he goes into a deep college football playoff run, something that we really haven't been able to see or digest is the same theory that I have with college basketball. We saw it with March Madness. If you go on a deep run and you're the star of the show, you're going to get drafted higher. Jack Sawyer might be a great example of that for Ohio State last year. You're going to see players make deep playoff runs, and their draft stock is just going to skyrocket because of that. Fernando Mendoza, I think, is a great example of what that's going to end up being. Dante Moore, though, I could see as a CJ Stroud type. I think Dante Moore, highly accurate player, is still trying to connect the dots. Unlike what we're going to be talking about with Fernando Mendoza, who has played a lot of football, he played at Cal and he played at Indiana. Dante Moore played very early in his career as a true freshman at UCLA. Gap year, basically took a year at Oregon to basically sit on the bench and just learn under Dylan Gabriel, and then has his, I guess, first true full year starting. Ty Simpson, first full year starting. It's important to note that because one of my red flags is a first year starter. You only have 1 year of tape. You haven't been able to react to an entire offseason where you go in as a second year guy and defenses are going to play you a completely different way. You don't really know how you're going to handle or react to that. We see it with Mac Jones. We've seen it with plenty of other players in the NFL that are first year guys that really don't have the longevity once they get to the NFL level. Dante Moore, I do think would benefit a ton from going back to school because he's got everything of the makeup of a 5-star quarterback that he had coming out of school. Cannon of an arm, incredible touchdown field, the decisiveness and decision making. I mean, it's everything that you're looking for in a quarterback, plus a little bit more juice with mobility. I do get a little concerned because it feels very similar to CJ Stroud, where he's looking so much to throw downfield. A lot of times when he's creating and scrambling to the outside, he's not really just letting it rip and you're not being decisive. One of the things that I heard with the Oregon USC game is apparently in pre-game meetings with some of the color commentators, doesn't like getting hit. I'm raising a red flag right there. I'm not looking for Cam Scatabo at the quarterback position, but a guy that's afraid to getting hit, if he goes into a bad situation, like say like a New York Jets or the Cleveland Browns, you're going to be getting hit a lot because your offensive line is probably not that damn good because you're picking number 1 overall. And then Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, I don't think will be going number 1 overall for a couple of reasons. Unlike Fernando Mendoza and unlike Dante Moore, the talent gap between the two, even though Ty Simpson was a former 5-star coming out of school, I don't think he's in that same talent stratosphere that does weigh into a number 1 overall pick conversation. I do think there is some incredible high-level tape when you go watch Ty Simpson, a guy that is able to just layer a football at the same level as what I thought we would be getting with like a Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, just pinpoint accuracy within the pocket, great footwork, but there's a couple of problems. The accuracy as of late has teetered off. When he was in that 4-game run where Alabama desperately needed him to step up to the moment, he did that. But over the past couple of games, we've been seeing a lot of deep accuracy issues, which does raise a couple of concerns on my end. Ty Simpson, I think, is a very talented guy that I think would fit in a Sean McVay or a Shanahan system at a very high level. But I don't see him as a guy that you go and look at and say, number 1 overall pick, come save our franchise. And I don't know if any of these guys are. And I don't think that is fair for a lot of quarterbacks to expect that. I think the expectation is a guy that, can you feel that you're confident enough if you take the next 2 years within his rookie contract, can he develop into a top 10 guy that can lead a top 10 offense and put us in a position to make a deep run? I think that would be fair for Mendoza. I think that would be fair for Dante Moore. Ty Simpson, the one thing that I think he does have an edge over the front 2 guys is when we look at Alabama, he's being asked a lot. They do not have a rushing attack. They do not have any kind of semblance of dynamic offensive play. It's a lot of, Ty, we need you to go make a play. Ty, get us out of this coffin corner. Ty, we're, 0-2 count, bases loaded, bottom of the 9th, we're up by 1, get us out of it. That type of situation. But you can see the cracks forming. And you can see, yes, he could do it, but it's not something you want to rely on him. That experience is invaluable, but then again, it's another first-year starter situation. To answer the question, who do I think would be the number 1 overall pick? Who do I think it's going to be? Who would I draft is a completely different conversation. And we'll talk about that when we get to the end of the season. I think Fernando Mendoza is going to be the number 1 overall pick. He'll probably be the Heisman. This guy is everything that the NFL is looking for in a traditional quarterback. Is he going to be a guy that I expect to be in the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes type of tier of quarterback? No, but is this a guy that I could see in that top 10 conversation and lead highly efficient offenses once they are built around him and put in a good position with a great offensive coordinator? I do. I think you could definitely see in those first years, if, say, the New York Jets does not get their offensive coordinator situation figured out, that they could be looking at the Cal version of Fernando Mendoza that had some great moments, but also put the ball in harm's way many times. But if you get the offensive coordinator right, the weapons, I believe in Adonai Mitchell. I believe in Garrett Wilson. You could be looking at a Fernando Mendoza like this year that could drive, 70 plus yards to go win the game. I could see a superstar quarterback from a guy like Fernando Mendoza. Dante Moore would be my second pick. I think Dante Moore would value a ton in going back to school, as rumored many of times. But if he enters this NFL draft, I'm easily picking him number 2. And then Ty Simpson would be my quarterback 3. I think he's just a little bit more limited of a quarterback. You're starting to see some of those cracks form. I think he's a great player. I think he is going to be more dependent on the situation that he goes into. That's why he would be a later round pick. I think the Steelers would also be a great fit for him as well. But with that in mind, that was the Stadium Pulse, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys staying and sticking around. I hope you guys enjoy the show. We've had so much traction with so many videos, and I just want to say thank you so much for giving this show an opportunity. If I haven't earned your sub now, I'll earn it one day. And so leave a like, check out the page, just give it an opportunity. It's free. I understand it takes some of your time, and that's invaluable. But that's the only thing I'll ask on this page. And thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.